Namaskar, welcome back to my channel. This is Tilak Datta. I'll continue with the series about the different facets of Mahakal's personality, his thoughts, his actions, and how to relate these to the questions which have been directed to me for a better understanding. So, in this section, I will talk about faith versus logic, intellect. There'll be some portions about astrology. A lot of the questions which have come to me, they ask me about, sir, please tell us when the war will start, when will Bhagwanji come, when this and when that. All these, I think, are in the realm of astrology. My own projections in the book were based on pure analysis and some amount of meditation. There was no astrology at all. In fact, I've stopped giving out matches between what is happening in my book and events around us. Many more things have matched, but everybody seems to think this is something to do with astrology. It is not, as you will understand when I elaborate further. In fact, one reader has asked, "Why do you get?" I'll read this. Why do you get involved in this astrology, fate, free will versus destiny kind of issues? What is your background in this? Don't comment loosely. Don't comment loosely. Okay. Where do I come for in all this? Including fate, astrology, philosophy, even Shastras. औकात क्या है? In mentioning my relevant background, I'm not seeking any reflected glory. It's just that I have a little bit of a base for discussing these subjects. I still consider myself a mere beginner. The following personal details is what really influenced the thrust of my book. So it's limited to that. It's just, let me outline that. My maternal grandfather, Dr. B. Datta, and especially my grand uncle, Vibhuti Bhushan Datta, they were both very well known mathematicians and Vedic scholars. Sir Ashutosh Mukherjee brought Vibhuti Babu to the Department of Mixed Mathematics at a time when Meghnad Saha, Dr. S. Radhakrishnan, Satyen Bose were all his colleagues, they rubbed shoulders. He left a famous work known as History of Hindu Mathematics as a legacy because he abandoned his life as a teacher and as a world renowned mathematician to become an ascetic. He embraced Shankara's Advaita and finally he settled in Pushkar. He had no ashram, no disciples, no roof over the head, nothing. Not even an author's name on the many works which he left behind. Among his discovered works was even a book called Prachin Hindu Jyotishi. Now, both these elders knew astrology very well. Famed astrologers would meet my grandfather from time to time, including from Benares. So, though this is the maternal tradition behind me, the fact is that I rebelled against this tradition during my youth. I even learned magic during my school days for a few months in order to expose Godmen. You know, this big double-decker bus would come from Delhi Public Library, and I found two big books of magic. I kept them for months. I found it very expensive. I did some amount of practice, but it gave me a certain amount of insight into uh, the skills and the differences between this, and it helped me later on. At that stage, there was a great dislike of charlatans. It's still very much there within me. So I even read up Kerio's books and mundane astrology too with a similar intent, sort of a cocky teenager that I have to disprove everything. It's all happened at that time. So I even questioned my grandfather on astrology. He was quite calm, and his remark was that if astrologers are infallible, or if they are all that accurate, why are future young widows born in their families? Swami Vidyaranya, that's my grand uncle, whom I never met, he disapproved of any involvement in astrology and also warned about sadhus exhibiting in occult powers, especially those who produce gold and precious stones, etc. So, to the person who sent this question to me, I hope, sir, this is sufficient. But I will not take any questions on astrology, nor do I make any loose comments. Thank you so much. Going on to philosophy, Our household also had an inherited collection of many spiritual works, which I gobbled up as a voracious teenage reader. This included many works by Sri Aurobindo. Needless to say, they went over my teenage head at that stage, and Sri Aurobindo's extremely verbose style of writing didn't touch me. I remained at that stage committed to upholding rationalism. How all that changed was in when I met Guruji, that is Pandit Ravi Shankar in USA. He loved my work and my script, but he insisted that I should have genuine, what he called genuine Indian spirituality at its core. He told me of many of his first hand experiences in spiritual matters. To me, his first recommended reading was what? Autobiography of a Yogi. Now, reading this book initially raised my hackles, absolutely, because it was once again fate, miracles on every second or third page. But gradually and parallelly, in fact, I was experiencing a series of non stop setbacks on the professional and personal fronts. Gradually, very slowly, a change of awareness came about on its own, mainly through meditative music, Marga Sangeet. I gradually started having insight. I became aware of causation, which was impossible for me to experience logically earlier. That's why my book carries a homage to Kumar Gandharv and Nikhil Banerjee. There are many more musical inspirations for me. Basically, it's just this that a door opened somewhere deep inside where earlier there was none, where I could not see it. Therefore, my whole effort has been to reconcile the intellect with the wider dimensions of life, not losing awareness of the core which one seeks, and yet remaining rational. This forms the crux of this book too, and of my understanding of Bhagavanji. So the quotations I provide here are once again from Sri Aurobindo's responses to questions asked by his disciple Dilip Kumar Roy. Again, Nisargadatta Maharaj and Lama Govinda are included, as they were in the last session. All these are relevant, I feel, in understanding Bhagavanji or Mahakal. I'll start with faith. Aurobindo says, and he quotes Ramakrishna Paramahansa, Ramakrishna ji says, faith is blind and precedes experience. To that, Sri Aurobindo adds, faith is the soul's witness to something not yet manifested or realized. On the other hand, Nisargadatta Maharaj says some teachers are against blind faith. They use reason, in fact. Faith is not blind. It is the willingness to try, to question the false. One must question the most inveterate of beliefs. This is a part of the Nath tradition, which Bhagavanji quotes. From here, I move to the Tibetan part. Lama Govinda says, unless we understand the mutual relationship between faith and spiritual forces, we shall regard the healing powers of a saint as either miraculous or as self-deception. But what we call as miraculous is nothing but a shortcut in the interaction of natural forces. That is, it's a direct action from one mind to another mind, or one mind to several minds, without the roundabout way via the senses and material agents. It's like that instinctive understanding you sometimes get even when you meet strangers on trains, It's just that you are connecting directly. No, even sometimes you feel the presence without even having seen a person before he enters around the corner. These things happen. So he says faith merely acts as the conductor, which makes this shortcut possible. Just as electricity, which is potentially present everywhere, becomes effective only in the presence of a conductor, so spiritual power becomes effective only in the presence of faith, be it faith in a divine power, or faith in a human guru, or faith in an ideal, or in one's own inner reality. I'll emphasize this last part because this is what appeals to me. Faith in one's own inner reality. This is the conductor. So I'll come back to Sri Aurobindo now, speaking about logic and intellect. He says, logic is the lesser faculty than intuition. And in fact, Yoga frees you from ego domination. The mind, according to Sri Aurobindo, cannot be the main judge of spiritual experience. The vital, which is the typical physical existence, is lower than the mind, it is lower than the divine. And yet, he warns, one must doubt and guard against pseudo spiritual experiences. This is, in fact, a must in yoga. He goes on to say, intellectual reason fails to give decisive experience or spiritual certitude. To determine the highest or ultimate truth, first rank is always given in India to spiritual intuition or experience, which means if an intellectual conclusion contradicts this supreme authority, it is held invalid in India. So he concludes this particular part by saying, it comes to an insistence that the mind is the ultimate judge of all experience. But spiritual experience has it that you can never hope to understand or get at the root of anything by your mind alone. The mind, by its very constitution, is unable to apprehend more than a very small fraction of the ultimate reality and its action. Of this divine action, the occult or supernatural phenomena is an instance and point. You cannot understand the true nature of such phenomenon with your mental probings. Since this is a fact, according to Sri Aurobindo, since this is a fact, it would be better if instead of dismissing them as fraud, you could suspend your judgment till you become competent to judge. From here, I will enter the discussion or veer it to astrology. I must admit right in the beginning that till date, I see most modern astrologers or tarot readers or psychics, in fact, crowds of predictive people today in rather poor light. I don't think many of them are better than even con artists. They are, with very rare exceptions, they will conveniently duck all their failed predictions and highlight only their successes. They induce fatalism, in fact, and inhibit karma. This is the way I see it. Their predictions will start with perhaps, maybe, ho sakta hai, lagbhag. You will hardly ever hoga. Shall happen, shall. You will be hard put to find something which is very specific. It is day specific, in fact, or hour specific. Why is this so? The earlier astrologers, the old timers, wouldn't do such mass-based calculations. They were basically lived simple existence, concentrated on single solutions with full humility. If they went wrong, they admitted they went wrong. There was always a margin of error. When they succeeded, the results looked fantastic. Yeah, where they could predict, birth or death or something 20, 30 years later, down to even the day and the hour. Yeah. When they succeeded, when they failed, they said they failed. For the modern YouTube-oriented astrologers, the safety exit net is always there. If a prediction doesn't work out. So, I was sent this link again and again that Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose will return in 2 to 3 years. 2 to 3 years is a very safe period. Public memory is short, and if the prediction doesn't match, one can always quote some new angle, some astrological factor which changes matters. You've seen, in the last few days, months rather, since the beginning of the year, they have gone overboard and talking about all kinds of World War III, and the COVID pandemic was to be over finally, latest by September. We are sitting here in December and you know where we are. Some said even July. Then India-Pakistan war was to start between August and September. These are open, missed predictions and they are brushed under the carpet. This is the way it is. Very similar things you will find in Vastu. Fact is that all these practices at some time, they had a kernel of truth and then all got corrupted over time, over these many centuries. In my book, I have spoken about that we have some kind of human body has a sort of inner transmitter and a receiver at the same time. Mahakal says that most of mankind has even in fact shut down all the antenna with which we receive these subtle, hints. And in fact, ulta, we are transmitting, in stress, we are transmitting our flawed waves. We are only adding to the problem. So, in this respect, let me tell you, if one were to practice pure music, in my experience, the body needs to be completely detoxified, entirely devoid of tension. The mind should be in stillness. I have personally experienced this, and I realized the true essence of our meaning sometimes when I was in the forest. Its deep scientific meaning. To practice astrology, it's not too different. It is not some mathematical calculation. The body which is doing this has to be in perfect tuning. Is to be proper connect. You're devoid of toxins, absolutely like a precision instrument. It's like the same thing, transmitter receiver. And if you're doing this on a daily basis, as a profession, you're making predictions around for all kinds of things, who will be the chief minister and who will do this and who will do that. And World War II and III. No wonder these guys got egg in their faces, they go wrong. At one point, this is about maybe 10, 15 years ago, I prepared a stock series of personal questions, which I identified certain people and I posed to them. They were all in the predictive trades. I wanted to test them. So I questioned simple street astrologers, Nadi astrologers, psychics, ESP gifted people. Same set of questions. What I found was that in every case, really, the people themselves, as human beings, they had the same fears, the same anxieties as in others, the same mundane problems, concerns, and almost the same flaws about their future predictions, which is where they all went wrong. None of them had stillness in them, that equanimity. Doubt, I think there would be, I'm sure, still a few people in the predictive science space who have that stillness. But such people normally, they don't predict commercially. If they are into sadhana, this is counterproductive. So, what happened to me? I'll explain in this context. The play between the logical mind and this transmitter and receiver thing, which I have mentioned in my book. While I was working on the book in the first 3 years, 3.5, 4 years, I worked out all the permutations and combinations about the real events, what could have happened, what may have happened, what mission Netaji has done, other people have done, and it I explained it or tried to explore it by logic to the very end, and yet I met with a certain point came where it was a dead end. There were it remained a pure riddle. There were many sections of my book which I could not resolve, and I tried day after day. I would sit at the computer and it was frustrating. I was almost unwell with this effort. There was no real productive output. I would fall asleep on the computer week after week. This went on and on. And finally, here in Germany itself, a very strange incident happened. Normally, I have been unlucky that miraculous incidents have rarely happened to me because I'm left brained mostly. I am very analytical. It's only in the last 10, 15 years that this has relaxed a bit so that the transmitter receiver thing has worked a little more to my favor. But old habits die hard. So the logical part was there. And it so happened one of my wife's very favorite spectacles, very much looking like the ones which Subhash Bose wore, gunmetal kind of a thing, suddenly got lost. So we searched the house up and down, I think 3 days. We used to walk in the forests. We've walked in the forest day after day after day. No sign of it. I told her, sorry, you've dropped it when you were on a walk, and bad luck. When I go to India next time, we'll try and get one. This, I think, 10 days passed like this. So it was during the same period. And one day I'm sitting in a chair, there's nothing in front of me except a carpet. No fixtures, no articles, nothing. Believe you me, between one moment and another, the spectacles appeared on that carpet. I actually did this to myself. I couldn't believe it. I looked here, there was not a soul in the house. My wife was in the garage downstairs. I remember even now, I peeped out and asked her, "Hi, did you find it?" And she got angry. She said, "What nonsense. Don't rub it in." I came back, the spectacle was still lying there. I wouldn't even touch it. Finally, I touched it, it was real. Then, when my wife came back, I showed it to her. We just sat down, we could not believe it. So, my logical mind refused to attribute anything to it. I even thought this is some what we call in Bengali gecho bhoot, that means some lowly spirit may be having fun with me, teasing me, or some other entity. No explanations. This is exactly how it happened. However, after this, slowly but surely, all the unresolved issues regarding my book, one by one, they fell into place. Many chapters which I had thought I will throw out, I retained them after some edit. And amazingly, it is precisely these chapters which have turned out to be the prophetic ones in my book. It is for me really amazing. Okay, on that note, let me come back to down here. Sri Aurobindo on astrology. So he tells his disciple Dilip Kumar Roy. Dilip Kumar Roy asks him, "Look, Count Sherio has made such amazing predictions. What do you have to say?" So Sri Aurobindo replies, why don't you talk about the many failed predictions which he did, which nobody talks about? Then Sri Aurobindo mentions destiny and free will. This is the question. This is the key. This question is the most knotted of all the metaphysical questions because both exist at the same time. He says stars, it's not in the stars, that stars are only a transmitting energy. They are not an originating power. And the stars are in fact not what you see. The stars are very often allegorical. In astrology, they are power centers, some of which the eye can't see. Rahu and Ketu, what are these, for instance? I mean these. So in astrology, Purushakara, which means your individual energy, your effort, can modify and even frustrate Daiva, which is fate. Someone who is meant to die in middle age can overcome this by free will and live till old age. Next, what he speaks about is very relevant to Subhash Chandra Bose. He says a horoscope may apply with great accuracy till a certain age and then it will apply no more. Why? This happens because when a person turns deeply to spiritual life, such a thing can happen. If this change, this turn towards spiritual life is very radical, then the prediction and the horoscope stops immediately. It doesn't work anymore. Or else, fate, if it's gradual, then this change, then the fate acts for a while without having the same inevitability. This again means that there is a higher power, or a source of spiritual destiny which can overcome the lower power, of which the stars are the so-called indicators. This is why none of the predictions regarding Subhash Bose's lifespan are not only not matching, why any astrological prediction about whether he is still alive, all this is ultimately mere speculation. It is Purushakara. You cannot put a spin on it. This is what I have read, what I have understood, and both I have experienced. So I'll continue with the quotation of Sri Aurobindo. What we have sown, we must reap in this life or another. Still, we are creating our fate for the future, even while right now we are undergoing old fate from the past. This gives meaning to our will and action. This is not a rigid and sterilizing fatalism. Will and action can modify or nullify past karma, even what Sri Aurobindo calls utkat karma, which is non-modifiable karma, if we are united with what he calls divine will. I have no doubt that Bhagwan Ji was united with divine will. I hope I'm right in that. We will discuss that later. So, neither karma nor astrology points to a rigid and immutable fate. Sri Aurobindo says, no prophet is infallible. Any prophet can go wrong. Okay. So, on this point, I'll make a digression. Sri Aurobindo and the mother were apparently not favorably inclined to Subhash Chandra Bose. Several times they made comments criticizing him very strongly about his involvement with the Axis powers or having joined with the Japanese, and they even forecast, or I've read the mother could see that if this happened and the Japanese came to India, India would be pushed into slavery maybe even for 100 years. No, this is a prophecy, it's a reading. But we are talking about Subhash Chandra Bose, Purushakara, with that kind of a force. I feel anything could have happened. This Utkat karma, if it was, could also have been overcome. So, using, in my own humble way, I can only say this, Sri Aurobindo's own example, you could put a question mark about these views. It's another thing that Subhash Bose's companion on the submarine, Abid Hussain, met with the mother later on and gave more details about the driving force behind his master, Subhash Chandra Bose. And that apparently had a deep impact on the mother, and they modified their rather negative opinion about Subhash Chandra Bose. So I'll continue with the quote from Sri Aurobindo. What is foreseen must be worked out by a play of forces: spiritual, mental, vital, and physical. In that plane, there is no absolute rigidity. Personal will is one of those forces. Napoleon, who believed in fate, still acted and planned. Yeah, despite the fact that he believed in fate. Why? He said famously, because it is fated that I should act and plan and contribute to the results. On this note, I will close today's session. My next session will only be available on my own channel for copyright reasons, and which you will find under my name and with my book profile. Thank you very much.